screen. Would you mind? Brilliant. So, of course, this is the subject focus session. Why consider Cambridge? Well, in Cambridge, you're surrounded by like-minded individuals who love the subject that they are studying, and they want to collaborate and develop their ideas. If you are a budding economist and you want to be in and around the conversations of future economists, then you may want to be applying to Cambridge, because just like you, all the other students here are passionate about their degrees. They may be mathematicians who you'll be able to collaborate with in terms of modeling and fitting your data. They may be physicists or engineers who may be able to help you in terms of your financial undertaking, in terms of laying down the actual hardware and the framework for you to be able to make trades in the stock market, say. Or they could be interesting people who have interesting ideas and that could take you down different pathways for future employment prospects. Ultimately, you're surrounded by other incredibly passionate individuals who will be able to shape you into the person that you will become. We have an incredible structure and taught by some of the best researchers in the world. So not only are you surrounded by students who are also incredibly passionate, but you're also surrounded by staff and researchers who will be able to teach you all this content. Throughout this time, you'll be supported by student services with a brilliant wellbeing team and a careers advice team that matches all of the universities. And we will make your student life fulfilling and enjoyable with plenty of fun societies and extracurriculars to pad out your academic studies. We also have one of the highest employability in the UK, as quoted by the Times Education in 2026, which means that not only are you coming here for a brilliant studious prospects, but you also have something lined up in the future, and we can help you with that, with a careers advice team and the wellbeing team. So you may have heard that Cambridge is a collegiate university. What does it mean to be a collegiate university? That means it's separated into 31 constituent colleges that admit students, and then you have all of your teaching through the central university. This is slightly different to a city or a campus university, where everything is collated into one campus or is dotted around the university, and all of your administrative work is done by one central organization. Instead, you're admitted by the colleges, and they will take care of you in terms of your pastoral care, your accommodation, your dining, and your societies. Whereas the university organizes the course content, the lectures, the exams at the end of the year, gives you a degree and sets the marks that you have to obtain to get there. This effectively means that the education is very similar, no matter which college you're going to, but some of the people that you meet at the colleges are slightly different. Some of the societies and the buildings that you apply to are slightly different. This effectively means that you've got this beautiful flavour of colleges that all have their different characteristics and different personalities behind them. It's a really interesting and enjoyable atmosphere. So we're Homerton. We're one of the colleges at the University of Cambridge, and we combine old and new. What do I mean by that? We have the wonderful old traditions of formals, graduations. We sometimes speak some Latin, sometimes speak some Anglo-Saxon. It can be a bit of fun. But we also have a lot of the new aspects that makes universities quite appealing, such as en-suites for all first years. We have a brilliant multi-million-pound AstroTurf pitch. We have a wonderful student gym. as well as just an all-round inclusive atmosphere that's that just makes Homerton a lovely place to live in. We also have the largest and well, one of the largest and most diverse student populations, with about 185 to 190 students each matriculating each year, with plenty of interesting people who've come from different backgrounds. So you get new takes on ideas because of this. Importantly, we also want to make an impact. So you study some of the inequalities and injustices around the world as part of your economics degree. And as a community, we want to bounce ideas off of how we might be able to change this and how we might be able to go about making an impact in the world. And because everybody comes from different backgrounds, you get so many different worldviews that you might not otherwise uncover. And of course, because everybody is so passionate about their subject, it means that these conversations can be accelerated and they can be pushed even further. So Homerton College has a small history. We're the newest college in Cambridge, founded proper in 2010, although we have been about since 1768 as a teacher training college. We're incredibly close to the train station, which means it can be easy to visit family and friends at different cities. And we have some lovely grounds and facilities as part of this. We're a little bit out of the Cambridge Centre, which means that we actually get some of the easiest quality of life, the best quality of life. We have shops that are open nearby, which is something that many other colleges can't boast about. And we also have plenty of facilities because of the spacious grounds, such as a gym, sports grounds, a cafe, which is open 24 hours, and a student bar. We also have some of the cheapest student accommodation in Cambridge, with a lot of it being incredibly new, i.e. built within the last 10 years. And we also have an incredibly high proportion of ensuite rooms, and we're, of course, like I said, promising ensuite accommodation for all first-year undergrads. So we also have some financial support on Homerton. The Cambridge Bursary is eligible for all home students who go through the student finance system. You don't have to take out a student loan as part of it, but you do have to be assessed as part of the UK government student finance system. And this is a bursary, which means that you don't have to pay it back, and you can get up to £3,500 as part of this, depending on your current situation. And if you are eligible for free school meals, you can get a further £1,000 to help towards your living costs. We also have some music and travel grants that Homerton itself runs. This means that if you want to pick up an instrument or you want to book some music lessons, we can help you learn and we can help you do this. Or, for instance, you wanted to go and visit an interesting country that you otherwise wouldn't be able to go and see. Say, for instance, you're particularly passionate about classics and you wanted to go and see the Pantheon in Italy. We can help you go out there and explore that area. Of course, with some additional restrictions in terms of your academic, in terms of being somewhat related to your academics. So you may have to write a small report about it and your experiences afterwards. We also have some student representation awards for those that go above and beyond for their time at Homerton, make sure that they are representing students well and say they have particular progress in sports, sciences, or indeed social activism. We also have internship grants. Say, for instance, you live out of London and you have an amazing internship that otherwise doesn't cover the accommodation costs to live in London, which can be incredibly hard to do with the cost of living. We can help you with that. We give you some money to move into there during your internship, and you can pursue this research that you wanted to do. And for when times get tough, we have the student hardship, the college hardship fund for when you are unable to afford basic necessities. And for student, young carers, care experienced students, we have some additional grants on top of this. So how do you apply? Well, hopefully, if you're coming to the economics subject focus session, you may have already picked your course. You can choose to apply to a direct college, such as Homerton, or choose to make an open application where you will be assigned a college as part of your application. Check for admissions test assessments. There is one for economics, which I believe is the TMUA. And you then make your UCAS application. Importantly, you need to sign up for your admissions test before you make a UCAS application. This is because the sign up for the TMUA is before the UCAS application deadline of the 15th of October. We then will ask you to complete some additional forms. This may be as to why you've applied to Cambridge in particular, something that you may not be able to convey on your personal statement, and for any forms like your if you're a post A-level student, you might want a breakdown of your results or the likes. If you have any written work or you're taking the admissions assessment, which you will do in terms of the admissions assessment, you will sit that then. And if we think you are able, then we may be able to do an interview in December, and you'll hear back from us in January. So this is the application process. There is more information on the university website on this. So please do look at the StudyCam website for this. I'll drop some links in the chat, and otherwise I will pass over to Dario.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alex, for this really exciting discussion about applying at Homerton, particularly to our college. So, in particular, I'm going to try to discuss something more about economics. So, for many of you who don't know me, hopefully you will know me. My name is, again, Dario Palumbo. I'm Director of Studies in Economics for the first years. Right, so what I would like to discuss is just some, ideas about some introduction of what economics is in general, and perhaps what is at, let's say, at Cambridge as opposed to other places. And in particular, what I'm trying to do, I'm going to try to explain what are the things which I might be interested, in a candidate which would apply for our course. And to be successful in our course, not in the application, but I really mean be successful in the degree, because that's the actual biggest challenge rather than the application. So yeah, let me just try to put something up if I manage. Right, there's a small presentation I prepared. Right, so the idea here, you can see this. So the idea here is starting from a simple question, which is why studying economics, right? Let me just remove these things. Oops, no. Control, yes. So, I mean, what it is, economics, is a very interesting subject for at least all of us which went through this. And the simple idea is that what is economics? Economics is actually something which affects us every day in life. People think this has to do with money, with finance. Sure, there's something close to that. But in reality, economics is more an applied social science than anything else. Of course, the drivers have to be pretty much interaction of social agents, and in particular, they have to do with some particular factors like tax, interest rates, wealth, inflation, or other like this. But most importantly, it has to do with the idea of how agents tend to interact under certain conditions, right? And what's the point? What do economists in reality do? They will provide effective tools and models and all these things you hear about to try to analyze what are the potential behaviors of these interacting agents. This can happen at many levels and in many also fields. So the idea is that, is to use, let's say, models, mostly quantitative models, but not only, to try to understand this, how society really behaves, right? So what's the point is that Cambridge itself, as compared to many other universities, is mostly focusing on really giving you this understanding of the core and fluent, both pure and applied economics, right? So which means trying to construct model to describe how agents to interact, and at the same time to empirically verify on data if these models and relationships are effectively true and correct, right? So what do you do? So I mean, economics covers for this reason many things. It's not only about money, right? But think about supply and demand. Supply and demand there are definitely objects, but the most important is the utility of people rather than the tool. The token money as we use is actually a token of exchange, right? So there's obviously, if we enter in the actual economy that we live, which is to do this economic system, we accepted the token as such as being the money, and therefore there are markets where the exchanges occur. But the exchanges, again, is not about money. The point is not economic in terms of the token, but in terms of the exchanges itself, of the goods. Because ultimately, what provides utility for people is not money itself, but it's what you can buy with money. So it's not money the point, it's the utility with respect to the goods you can. So therefore, there are goods out there, there will be a price, which will be paid instead of token. And then, of course, there's a market on how you gain this token, how you will generate this concept of wealth, or let's say you accumulate this exchange of tradability power. And this is done through potentially providing yourself a service rather than a good, which will be working, right? So therefore, there's the concept of employment. And from this, we can go on as constructing from a very basic system of few agents into many, larger system, which takes into account many other aspects, which we know extremely well nowadays, to do with inflation, unemployment, obviously. Now, also is not only about agents, there are agents which have an impact on this system much more than others, and these are institutions, right? So systemic institutions, like, banks itself, plus lenders, of course, central bankers, states, governments, and all these things, which define what is called monetary policy. So it's really not just about money. It's really about anything else but money. This is the point. The money is only the token of this, right? And of course, again, economics in some particular cases to behavioral economics trying to studies why we do certain choices, right? So there are many aspects of why people will be interested in the actual economics. Obviously, we tend to classify these, particularly in these three branches, which are the most important ones, which obviously to do with microeconomics, macroeconomics, and econometrics, right? So microeconomics and macroeconomics, as you imagine, are literally the study of the micro aspects, so you might have heard of it. So literally the toy model of exchange of two people in the world, or let's say the idea of being one agent as opposed to a market, which of course is out of their control, how this person tends to behave, and then from them trying to increase the number of agents after number of n and see what actually happens. It's still in a finite number of agents. And then we have macroeconomics. Now, macroeconomics, when this number of agents tends to become extremely large, tend to approximate what is our societies nowadays, right? And actually, this is a more broad sense of how our the entire world and economic system tend to work nowadays, in thinking about what's the impact of investment in respect to governments, what's the impact of central banker choices, how trade between two different countries tend to affect the prices of goods, or in particular interest rates, which is the value of the currency into exchange, and all these other things, right? Now, the third aspect is actually where I work particularly in, because these two is a way to theorize and to construct, let's say, in a more interpretable way, tools to describe what things we observe. But now we need something else, something which need to help us to verify if tools are actually as they are. And actually, this is econometrics, which is just a glorified way to say which is statistics applied to economics. But why is different from effectively to standard statistics? Why you just call it statistics? Because econometricians tend to talk about two particular things, which one of them is the behavior of relationships between variables, which is implied by models, or simply trying to look at the data and trying to use certain particular type of tools, which is causality analysis, also for cross-section analysis, regression, to understand what is the actual relationship, what is the sign, if it's positive or negative, it changes over time without imposing a model. Or we actually impose a model and we verify with our data if the model actually makes sense. On the other hand, the other important study, which is sometimes overlooked, is the study of variables over time. How certain things tend to change over time, what's the relationship with these certain variables across time, and how can we try to create forecasts, try to create an idea on how to loosely predict what potential would be future scenarios of past stuff. Now, obviously, we're going to go more in detail about that, but this is, obviously, we're not thinking about trying to answer what's the price of sterling tomorrow. This is not the point. Actually, this is going to be dwell more into that, but let's just say. Now, this is economics in general, right? But what's happening particularly in Cambridge? So economics can dwell from this to philosophy of economics, to think about the great thinkers of the past, Adam Smith, Ricardo, Hobbes, and all the other thoughts in this way. It is dwelled into behavior economics, trying to understand how, loosely way people tends to behave, why it makes we do certain choices. Experimental economics, trying to take actual agents and try them and ask the 20 people what they think about something. If they're, they are really interested, what is their effect in their life of earning $1 more? What would they do with it, right? But these are, there are many of these aspects. But we believe in Cambridge that, particularly in how the system and the world works right now, we need, some sort of measurable impact of all this, right? It's important to know all these aspects and story, but we really try to train people on constructing quantitative models, both in simple economics and eventually, of course, in econometrics, which will help us to try to, describe in a more rigorous way how this society works. And in particular, this is very important because we dwell quite a lot with a lot of applied statistical sciences, with using tools like R, Python, Stata, because obviously we know also that the world is going in that direction right now. Actually, if you want to think about it, this is how you construct dynamic system, which eventually get trained by stuff even like AI. Because at the end of the day, if they want to create a global model of how certain behavior works, even if you think about what Amazon does, right? How is Amazon being able to understand exactly what type of, object you would like to buy, and then you will get an advert on that given by your behavior? Ultimately, is trying just to study your social behavior and interaction with other agents, which is a marketplace, through the marketplace, which is Amazon. So at the basis of this, there's a really quantitative model behind this. There's a quantitative economics model behind this. So it's important to have an understanding of these things because they are pervasive in our society nowadays. They really strongly believe, which is very important to train you up to this level, because it's what the market outside demands, which is what the complex society we live in nowadays demands, right? So this is really important. Now, what are the type of relationships? I'll give you an example of these things, right? You imagine relationship simply being a graph, right? But a graph like this, which is just pretty much the earning of both men and women, the average earning going from 64 to 2012, right? How has it changed with time? And it is split between, of course, panel A and B, which are left men and right women, and by particular aspect which have to do with the degree level, right? So the education level. So why this is important? Because of course is one of the questions you might ask, that everybody will ask, which we try to answer, right? What's the value of a degree, right? You're intending to try to go through, in trying to pursue hopefully a career in Cambridge, a degree in Cambridge. And what's the value of this degree, right? You're spending money for these things, and what's the point? You're learning something. But then eventually we know that there's a correlation, with potentially what is the value of this degree as opposed to what you're going to earn in the future. As I said, earning is not the point of the money itself, but what the money can actually buy. What is your future wealth, as opposed to the things you will be able to do, influence than anything else. So, I mean, of course, earning is a measure, is one of these measures, right? So it's quite important from this perspective. Anyway, we know that obviously, gender economics is told us for a long time. I think the penultimate Nobel Prize winner was of this, trying to explain how, level of wealth has changed dramatically across gender and across time, in our society. So if we get a graph like this, what we would like to learn after your degree, you'll be able to interpret a graph like this. And if I look at this graph, I mean, what it comes out, I mean, obviously you imagine that in both the cases, having higher level of degree, so of education, potential will give you an opportunity right now, as more in the past, to earn a higher salary. But then at the end of the day, we look at these two things, we also start realizing, okay, but then, clearly in the past, this was a massive difference, particularly for men as opposed to women. Now the gap is not that high, right? You can clearly see the bachelor plus degree means if you have even a higher bachelor, things you have a PhD, right? Which means that people that had a PhD, female who had a PhD until the 80s, they're not really earning much. Actually, that potentially not even a high school dropout, right? So this is changing because society has changed. That to value the role of women in society, this has been starting to recognize. So, if you look at this graph, at the same time, we started realizing that, there's a demand always higher and higher for, higher education, because of course our world is becoming more complex. And at the same time, we need specialized people to keep building all these, important works we've done, data centers, constructing AI objects or analyzing, financial assets, or at the same time, understanding about the legal system is becoming very complicated. So, what's the interaction of what the job market is going to be in the future. This is not an AI job. Understanding this is just is an economist stuff, right? And then, we look at this graph like this, and we can really say, okay, if I look at the top, very top people, both women, top, sorry, highest educated people, both female and male, if you look at this graph, well, there's not really much difference, right? So we probably say, okay, then, and if I look at the other graphs, I mean, clearly, probably females are earning much more at any other level of education than men do. So what do it mean? That, the patriarchy is over. That means there's no real efforts anymore to do it. I mean, we've done, we've reached equality. Actually, probably the other way around. Well, when you learn these type of things, you'll start to learn also how to read the graphs and what's not written in the graph, which is not, this is all about relationships, which, probably what's not written in the graph is that the proportion of people in the society which actually achieve such a level of education, and clearly is much, much more skewed for men and women. Therefore, if I look at the overall income distribution between men and women, obviously women's are much less represented, much lower in scale on average than would be for men. But a graph like this one is not going to tell you. So what's the point is trying to understand what are these relationships and why they behave in such a way, what's written and not written in the graphs, and eventually test empirically this type of relationship, right? Is this really a trend, what we see on the right for female, or is not really a trend, right? Is it really a decreasing trend for men on the left, or a flattening trend, is it? So you will learn the tools for this type of things. But this is a type of relationship, right? At the same time, again, you need an empirical implication, because at the end of the day, you cannot just look at a graph and say, oh, it's trivial. Why didn't economics? It's trivial. Well, this is another graph, which potentially is complicated to describe, but, it's quite puzzling, right? So apparently people have started believing, particularly in the stock market, that there was always been a negative relationship between dollars and oil, right? And then empirically has been seen like that. Is it the case always? Is this the case that happens all the time? So they even gave a story about this. They say that, because if dollar would become weaker, then of course this means that the oil, which usually is denominated in dollars, becomes cheaper and people buy more, so the price increases, right? That makes perfect sense. Or another interesting story, if what's the other way around? So if, for instance, well, in general, people started believing that the dollar was a hedge. What does it mean, a hedge? Is that, if the dollar was starting to become weaker, the oil would actually, be a more safe haven to move for. So if dollars began losing money, was losing value, well, the oil is not going to lose value. It's something we're always going to use. We have petrol in our cars and anything else. So it's going to be, like used as a hedge. That's why you have to have inverse relationships. But I know if you think about nowadays, right? Think about what has happened recently in Iran and anything, cost of fuel increasing ridiculously. We actually see the other way around, right? We see that, when, the price of oil increases, the dollar strengthens much more. And what is the reason? Well, because the world has changed in a certain sense, right? The US is becoming a producer of oil as well, and dictating the market. So of course, since actually this relationship, which was historically being always considered, is not the same anymore. And also, it's not really the magnitude of these changes not the same anymore nowadays after 2019, even after COVID. Also because people started not using oil anymore, right? It's not the most important thing that exists now, the all the renewable energies, right? So again, it's not just a matter about looking at a graph and all things are, right? Again, because we don't test these things. We can just look at a graph and say things are, and it can come up with very stupid results, like something like that. Is there a graph? We know very well, Apparently, if you look into this graph, the level of UFO sighting in Kentucky and the probability of the first name named Brooklyn apparently correlates fairly high. So this is just a empirical correlation. Just compare it, right? But can this be true? Can it be? Well, if this is true, then this is true. For instance, we can actually correlate the distance between Uranus and Saturn and the nuclear power generation in Brazil. As much as we can check the burglaries in Oregon and a number of people viewed it, the count of days in our life. Wonderful movie, by the way. So apparently, more people have watched it, and apparently, this thing has gone down. Or the most amazing one, per capita consumption of margarine and divorce rate in Maine. Apparently, in Maine, if you actually want to keep your marriage, probably you don't want to buy margarine. So I don't know. This is all this type of results. You can directly see all these things in this website, which actually is very fun. The idea of all spurious correlations that they are. And actually, you come up with a story with that, which is an AI-generated paper, which tells you a story about this, right? But why this is all important, because we know, right? It's not just a matter about correlation. Two things can be correlated, but doesn't mean that one causes the other one, right? And it brings to the point of the difference between correlation and causation, which is one of the main things you will learn. And it's just the philosophical concept that just if two things move at the same time doesn't mean that one is affected on the other one. But there's also an empirical way you will learn to test. And that's actually where the econometrics comes into place. Because it's not just a matter of making sure that one, in your model, in your function, X increases or Y increases, this actually comes exposed. You have to empirically verify this, right? As they say, the causal inference that we do in econometrics is the actual process determining the independent actual effect of some factor or phenomenon actually is reflected in a cause and effect relationship with the other variable. This is the important thing. In order to do this again, you will have to use statistical probabilistic tools, which works. And this is something you will learn. It's a very, very important thing you will learn. Right. So what else? Well, as I said, why do we use also econometrics? Not only in the statistical system of causality. Look at this also because probabilistic tools can help us see what I was mentioning before, which are forecasts, right? So if you're an economist, probably you're interested in trying to understand what is the behavior of the economy in the future. And particularly what you want to look at about the key economic variables like unemployment, for instance, right? Or GDP, in this in particular example, this is GDP rate and the total level of GDP, log GDP. How does it behave in the future? So we are not constructing the models or our statistics to learn where is the actual value. I mean, the real value is the blue line, right? I mean, and most of the people, go around and say, oh, but then, economists always fail for predicting the value. Yeah, true, because effectively the point is not to know exactly what's the value of GDP tomorrow. If I will know what the price of oil will be tomorrow, I'm not going to be here teaching you these things, right? Perhaps. Because the point is actually the methodology that you will learn, which is not just a matter about that. It's just understanding with what confidence you will learn. Actually, the blue line is much less important than the red line. The red line is what is called as a probabilistic forecast. Probabilistic forecast means with 95% probability in which range now our GDP is going to be, right? Where is it going to be with 95%? Because the truth is that we all know we are not clear at all able to understand, what are the point forecast, what is the actual, we're not, seers, you're not divining what the future is going to be, but we are trying to make estimates, and we through educated estimates, we're trying to learn a range of a probability. This probability is actually called as a risk. So what is the risk factor of certain things occurring a certain way? And this is exactly what these red lines tend to describe. This is something you will learn, and it's something which people do in what's called time series also. And obviously, another thing, obviously, not mention that, economics tools are used for financial modeling, obviously, right? It's a very long history of financial modelers, which use very strongly quantitative tools to try to forecast all these financial variables and trying to, again, do probabilistic forecast around it, which why this is important, because of course finance is so pervasive in our world and it behaves in such a crazy way. And of course, there's a higher reward in trying to get into this industry if you learn all the tools. And this is something you will actually do, eventually, if you will be interested, right? So there's so many avenues, right? Anyway, back to the actual use of maths. So now that we know how to use the stats in terms of econometrics, right? In terms of causality, in terms of prediction, right? We always learn in micro and macro lots of mathematical modules. And, we teach you maths at a very, very high level. I would say that probably is the most quantitative economics degree in the country. And why is it so? Because effectively, you need to be a good mathematician to create a good model. Because you need to know what are all the functioning, how this function behave, and how your model would behave, to make sure that it reproduces things that you see in reality, right? So obviously, people say on the other hand, oh, economics only look at maths, and maths is not important too. I mean, math is not reality. True, nobody of us believes that the maths is the reality. None of our equations is the reality. But as some people have said in the past, these are not exactly how things do behave, but help us to have an understanding of things in a certain sense or loosely tend to behave, right? What are the relationship if something happened? What else? What is, besides understanding a relationship through an economic model, after, if I construct the actual model, I pin down, what are other variables which can be affected by this, right? How will these things do interact all together? And actually we do what is called after, which is comparative statics, trying to make understood what the model is, then what happens to the other variables you want after, right? So just to look at the data and try to infer what the relationship is, but I was also trying to have an understanding of how these things tend to interact, right? So this is an important point. Bear me 1 second only. Yeah. So we have to construct models, and models, they behave in a certain way. In a simple way, there has to be mathematical functions, right? And why is a mathematical function? Well, this is a simple example. I mean, this is the most simple economy you can think of, right? Two agents, right? Where there are two goods in the economy, there are two in the society. There are only two agents, Gilligan's and Marianne's, right? And they have to exchange. Means that they start off with certain quantities of these goods, right? Which is not the same, right? But even if it's the same, would they want to have the same quantity? If they don't want, what they can do, they can start to exchange the two variables across each other, right? Exchange the two goods. And when does this exchange stops? When you use what is called an equilibrium, where everybody's satisfied with the things they have. And then exactly these two equations on the lines you see, the red and the blue line comes into place, which is the other important things where the human aspect comes into place, is the utility. What do you actually want? So in trying to this line describes different level of utility for different combination of these goods, right? And when is the equilibrium is where effectively the two lines interacts. Why? Because then both of them achieved in their own perspective the highest level of utility they could achieve. They would have been able to achieve a higher level of utility, obviously with a different combination, but this is without taking account of the other agents. Given that there is another agent in the economy, of course, there has to be an equilibrium which let's say, makes everybody equally better off, right? And this actually is the concept of trying to become equal in the sense of equal in the sense of wealth, in the sense of utility, right? And this is something you will learn. What are the efficiency and inefficiency in an utilitarian perspective? And this is something which is also important. And what are these functions? Well, the functions, the most biggest challenge is to describe function which represents what people actually want, right? Obviously, they're incomplete. Obviously, only take into account of some part of the society. We are very complex human beings. But if we only look at these aspects, right? If in our economy there's only these assumptions, how do things behave, right? And one of the important points that the economists tend to do is exactly to simplify problems, which are very complex, trying to bring them down from a very simple perspective and trying to generalize what, the problem, the solution could potentially be. Obviously, the solution with only 2 agents is not the same with n agents or a very large number of agents, but this is already a starting point. If you have enough, of course, quantitative knowledge, obviously, then you can generalize this and trying to replicate this equilibrium for many agents and see what actually happens, right? But in order to do this, we need to know a lot of maths, right? So this is the important point. Right. So after giving you a general broad interview or introduction about what economics is, right? So let me just tell you about what we actually interested in economics as an economic candidate at Cambridge. So at the end of the day, when what I like to see in an interview, thinking of someone who could be actually, a good candidate. Well, I'm looking for a genuine interest in the subject, as everybody would be, because of course, this is a difficult path, that's important to say. I mean, Cambridge is notoriously a great place, one of our greatest minds have been, but also, people do work hard. And of course, if you're not passionate about what you do, I mean, it will be difficult, right? This is the important point. Now, we need to have a good grasp of the equivalent A levels materials, right? Particularly, the maths, we ask for further maths, right? And it's not, compulsory, but we strongly advise it, right? This is an important thing. And the reason is because, as I said, this is one of the most quantitative degree in the country. And you're going to have 3 years of very intense lectures. There are 3 terms in Cambridge. Each term is very short, only 8 weeks each, right? And you're going to have your exams immediately as soon as you come back after a few weeks in this term. You're going to do them all together. It's going to be a lot of content, and you'll have to study and learn progressively and do your revisions progressively, because otherwise it will be too much to handle it all at the end. In order to do this, you need to also have the right level, because at the end of the day, if you don't if you would start, you don't have the right level of the basic knowledge of maths or anything which is required, you will eventually struggle. And this is not, I'm not saying this because I'm a bad person, but because it actually empirically happens. And the best things, at the end of the day, this doesn't have to be, a very, I would say, a trending journey. It doesn't have to be something which is, you will have, you will have to enjoy it. I mean, the point of doing a degree is also to enjoy. So if you will struggle at anything all the time, trying to catch up and we're always feeling behind, this is not going to help. And eventually, if some people don't apply to us and then we believe it at an assessment level, I always tell them, well, at the end of the day, you were not ready this time, but doesn't mean the Cambridge's doors are closed. You can always apply back for a master or anything else, right? And we are doing you a favor, because if you will struggle, really, it would be very difficult for you to continue without having the basics. So that's the reason why. And again, at the end of the day, what I mean is that at the same time, I don't want you to come to me and then tell me, oh, I know the entire subject from scratch. I learned all economics syllabus for all the 3 years and everything. I know this and that. No, this is at all not what I want, right? I need, that you know the basics, which the basics are not the basics of the subject, but what the subject requires, which are the requirements, which are the maths mostly. But the other thing is that, you need to be able to construct logical thinking out of the box, right? The video produce some sound arguments and describe why certain things are in a certain way. And another important thing is that obviously what I will ask in the interview, try to do you in a framework that you know, but obviously I would like to see how you think. So I will test you, I will ask you a question on something which is not necessarily what you're used to, things you haven't not seen. And the important thing to remember is that the right answer doesn't exist. Or better, phrase it correctly. Right answer exists, but not for me. In a sense that I don't even care about the answer to be right or wrong. I care about the reason. That's the important point. I can try to understand how you think, the thinking process through the interview while you are trying to tackle problems. This is the important point. And obviously, if you come to me and you receive a question you've seen before, you tell me the answer immediately. This is one of the worst interview ever, because at the end of the day, we'll have to ask you another question, because this is not exactly what I'm after. I don't want to know the book answer. I want to see the reasoning, right? This is the important thing. Right, so could be a question? Okay, the question, Brendan, if you know or not know probability, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start to tell you what basic probability is, simple probability framework, right? What is simple probability? Well, it's a framework of probability where, the outcomes are countable and, they're easily measurable, right? So in simple probability, how do you compute the probability? Well, it's the number of outcomes, of favorable outcomes, in the question asks, say, what's the probability of getting 6 in a dice roll, right? Is one favorable outcome, which is 1, out of the sample set, which is over the total number of outcomes, right? It's all constructed like that. This is one of the ways, and at the same time, we know both what we know what's the probability of. These are two examples. This is two events. You have a dice roll, and the probability of having either 1 or 2, or 1, 3, and 4, right? So you know that this is 2/6 and 3/6, right? Well, what the probability of both occur at the same time? So the intersection, right? So both occurs at the same time is something which occurs in both the cases, right? And this is what occurs in both the cases. Obviously, is the interaction between the two, right? This is the point. So it's 1/6, and this actually comes out of the fact is out of 2, right? So the point here is that if events are independent, like you have a consecutive dice roll, right? You roll the dice twice. You're rolling a 6 and rolling a 5 is 1/6 and 1/6, and the result is 1/36, right? At the same time, we also have to remember that if I tell you what's the probability of getting a number, let's say 6, this is clearly 1 minus the probability of rolling any other number, which is 5/6, right? 1 minus 5/6 gives you 1/6, right? Because the two are called complements, right? So the opposites. The probability of an opposite statement is 1 minus the other, right? Now, knowing these very simple rules, we can probably start to tackle a question, right? The question would be, was the probability in a room of 25 people, at least 2 people share the same birthday, right? What is it? Well, we start thinking what the problem is, right? We can start off from trying to use the rules on this one, or trying to think a bit more smart. I just mentioned that sometimes probability of something is 1 minus the probability of the opposite, and sometimes one of these two is easier than the other one. This seems a bit complicated, so maybe it's easier to try to look at the opposite, right? So what is the opposite statement? The opposite statement are at least 2 people sharing the same birthday means that nobody shares the same birthday, right? So what does it mean? Is that in order to compute this, you have to start off in a room of all these people, nobody shares this birthday. What does it mean? That if I start off letting one person in the room, how many days can he be born in the year? There are 365. Out of how many days? 365, which is, 1, right? Because also obviously can be born on any day of the year and the guy is born, right? Now, if there's a second person enters the room, right? What's the probability that it doesn't share that birthday with the first person? In order to do this means that it has to be born on 364 days out of 365 because it cannot be born on the day when the first person is born, right? Then I have a third person coming in, right? And then this person, not to be born on the same days as the other two, he has 363 days available because he cannot be born on the day where the first or the second person is born out of 365. 363 favorable outcomes over 365, and so on for all the 25 people, right? Then the probability of being a person to be born on these days, each of these persons is independent, so we multiply them together. And what's the result? Well, the result is something just slightly above 5, right? The idea is that the 0.5 is 23, to 25 would be slightly above, so it's a quite high probability, right? More than a half for sure, right? If you can believe. So that's a way to solve it, right? Another example, a problem which you really, really know very well, because I don't know, there was a movie about, some people have seen it, but it's a very famous problem. It's called the Monty Hall problem, right? So you're in a game show, you get given a choice of 3 doors. Behind one door, there is a car, and behind the other, there are goats, right? You pick a door, say number 1, and the host, or the host was behind the doors, open another door, let's say number 3, which has a goat as well. Now he then says, do you want to pick door number 1? Is it to you or number? So if you want, the story goes is that he shows. So you pick a door, let's say door number 1, right? And then he shows you number 3 that there is a goat. Now it tells you, do you want to change your choice? You want to keep sticking to door number 1, or you want to move to door number 2, right? Now the answer to the question depends if it's your advantage or not to switch the choice. to move from 1 to 2, right? Now, the answer everybody knows is the idea is that you should be switching, right? Is the thing. But the question is why? And you can use probability to this, or you can just simply intuitive try to come up with this idea, right? Since I always pick door 1 in all 3 cases, right? In the first case, since the host has been showing me the goat, now behind the other card, the door, there's the card, right? So the idea is that if I switch, I win, right? So in one case, first scenario, I win. Second scenario, I still stick to door 1, and the other one there's a goat. The other person the host has shown me a goat, means that in the other door, which now is door 2, there is effectively a car. So in this also scenario, if I switch, I win the car. Now, in the last scenario, what happens? Behind my door, there's the car, right? But then, since if the person has shown me the goat, I know for sure that if I switch in this particular case, right? In this particular case, I will lose because I would pick the other goat. Second goat is left. But what this means is that if I switch in 2 scenarios out of 3, I win. So it's more favorable to switch. This is the type of reasoning which will be interesting, for you to see. So, as I said, it's not a matter about the answer, because if you already tell me, oh, this is which, and I ask you why, you don't know how to explain it. I mean, it's problematic, right? So, the point is just trying to have an honest chat and try to reason about these things, okay? Right, let me try to give you now an example of what we tend to teach in economics. At Cambridge, we also could be an interesting question once we know it, but this is a type of style of what things we teach, right? Well, a very interesting topic, which comes into microeconomics particularly, and general maths, to be honest, is actually game theory. Game theory is the strategic behavior, the understanding of strategic interaction between agents, right? And the idea is to construct a mathematical modeling of this. It was actually constructed by these 2 Nobel Prize winners, which John von Neumann, back in the old days, actually participated even to the Manhattan Project, and John Nash, which died, unfortunately, not too long ago. But he was the famous guy behind the movie A Beautiful Mind. Some people, you might know, right? So yeah, this is quite an interesting one. So how does it work? Let's describe that there is a game, right? What type of game, right? Okay, this game is called the dating game. It's one of these type of games, right? It's a toy game. So you're on a first date with your lover, your dreams, right? And you can propose 2 activities. Very simple. A safe activity, like having a coffee, and another one, exciting activity. Go to a water park, right? Now, your date could either want a safe activity or exciting activity, right? And there are different results if your ideas matches up or clash. So this is more or less how we present this type of behavior. This is called a payoff matrix, right? So the numbers are just, indicative, but it's just the important is not the actual magnitude of the number, it's the relative magnitude between each other, right? What does it mean is that if it's you have 2 choices, right? Either going for choosing to propose a coffee or to go to the water park, right? And what are the blocks below? Well, the blocks below tells you the utility or the payoffs for both of you, left and right, if both of you tend to choose certain choice, right? So if you propose coffee and the other one proposes coffee, both of you gets, let's say, a utility of 10, right? But because both of you propose the same things and you are keen on these things, right? But maybe you would have both preferred to go to the water park. And if both of you propose the water park, both of you go to 20, let's say. So it's much higher than the probability of having coffee because it's a more exciting activity, right? But if you have a mismatch in what you propose and the other person proposes, right? Then, perhaps it means there's a mismatch in what you actually want. So you will feel, or the other person will feel, in some cases that, you will missing off on the other opportunity, right? And actually, there's a penalty more in your particular case because probably you propose something which the other person didn't want, right? So there's all these type of behaviors that, what is the best way to bring someone on a date, right? What would they like? What would they enjoy, right? This is a strategic type of action behavior. Now, this is what the outcomes would look like, but in particular, how the game behaves. Well, the game behaves in a certain interaction where people don't really know what the other person either wants or will potentially propose, right? So just to make more, some structure to this, right? Just describe the players are agents, right? The agent anticipate the game, you and your date, right? The strategies are for both of you the same, so either coffee or water park, but this is actually called strategies, right? The outcomes are the blocks of the matrix, right? The 4 blocks which are because becomes they are the outcome given by the combination of the choices of both of you and your data. And the payoff is exactly what you gain out of it. So the numbers inside the blocks, right? Now, as I said, there are many games, and of course, tend to behave in different ways. But in particular case, the one I'm playing right now is a game which was called with the incomplete information as opposed to complete information. Complete information means you know what the other person wants, and obviously, if you know what the other person wants, you would prefer. Then eventually, you will actually go and choose for that, but you don't know this, right? So this is the point. And this is called a game for incomplete information. Date actually knows the same, right? So the majority of the games actually are played in such a way that actually you have to think about what is your best strategy, given that you don't know what the other is going to decide, right? And you don't even know what the payoffs for the other person would be, right? So in order to analyze these games, you have to think about what is the concept of best response. So there's one way which actually, is the idea of dominant strategies, means that you will choose a certain strategy over the other one if in both the cases, regardless of the choice of the other one, your payoffs are going to be higher, right? This means you're going to be your dominant strategy, you're going to do it regardless. You don't have any incentive in taking the other option, right? However, the best response idea is that, what would be my best choice? So my best propose, even that the other person would propose something else. This is called the best response, right? So the idea of a best response works in this way, right? So if I propose coffee, right? What would be the best response for the other person, right? For Mrs. Wright, right? If I propose coffee, the person is gonna, between the coffee and water park, right? Sorry, the other round, so it's actually this matrix. So if I propose coffee, right? What the other person is going to do? Well, can either choose water park or coffee, but clearly, if I propose a coffee, then she actually would want to propose, given this payoff, to propose also coffee. This means that one a potential equilibrium, the best response to your coffee will be another coffee. Now, if I propose a water park, right, what the other person is going to behave? Well, if I propose water park, given this level of payoff, the person will be better off to agree to go to the water park rather than to take the coffee. So the actual best response to coffee is actually coffee. And the best response to water park is water park for the other person. Now, if I do the same for the other person, so if the other person chooses some, right? Because this happens simultaneously, right? You're choosing simultaneously. What would be the best response for you? So if she or he chooses to go for coffee, you will be given this payoff, better off to choose coffee as well. So your best response to coffee is also coffee. And for her, the best response, sorry, if she chooses or he chooses water park, your best response is again water park. What does it mean is that given that your best response for both the two agents tend to agree on this, means that these two outcomes, coffee, and water park, are what is called the Nash equilibrium. So the Nash equilibrium, which is exactly what type of things that Nash has theorized, is the best strategy that gives here the other payoff, given the strategy of the other players in the game, which is that given the best response, if the best response of both the agents then to agree, then we'll construct an outcome, we'll identify an outcome which people will not deviate from this outcome, right? So this means that it would be an equilibrium. People will be happy to settle. So in this particular game, the equilibrium, the Nash equilibrium are only two: coffee, and water park. What's the take home though, right? I don't know, since these two can be the equilibrium, but if I would know what the other person actually want and prefer, we all would stick only with water park because this will give us the higher utility for both of us. But since the game is not incomplete information, I don't know what's the things that will give the other my date the best outcome, right? The best payoff. So eventually, this cannot be the only solution of water park. We could also be coffee. There's no actual, probability will describe which of the two will be the outcome. We know that either one of the two would be outcomes, right? Which means that we're still not better off as if we would disclose and talk to the other person and would both go to the water park, right? And these are exactly the type of mathematical analysis we tend to do, right? Now, game the game we just played was simultaneous, but obviously it's also what is called sequential. It means given that a person has chosen something, what the other person can choose as a consequence. The type of behavior works in the same way, right? In strategic behavior. But the idea is that this happens sequentially. And therefore, you construct this what is called a tree. It's called the creative form of a tree, which eventually is what people tend to use also nowadays in machine learning, considering all the possible outcome and scenarios given something happens, something else happens sequentially. This is actually what tends to construct deep learning algorithm, with a whole forest is called, right? Right, a very last example of a game of a sequential game, right? Now let's start thinking about the sequential game in a different construct. This is called the Hotelling model, right? So in this Hotelling model, there are two ice cream vendors, and there is a beach, right? And every person these two ice cream vendors sell the same product, which is an ice cream, right? They sell it at the same price. What to differentiate them? If this is the beach, that line from 0 to 1, well, we know that the people will gonna go to the person, the ice cream seller, which is the closest to them, right? So the question is that where the two ice cream sellers are gonna be positioning themselves across the beach, right? So let's assume they both start at the opposite side of the beach at 0 and 1, right? Let's say this is sequential, right? So what happens? They are equally sharing half of the beach, right? It's a very nice beach in Nice for information. You want to go there. So, but this is an equilibrium. Is this an equilibrium? Well, probably not, because the right person, which is going to be in the right far end of the beach on the right-hand side, which assuming is the first player in the sequential game, will have an incentive to move a little bit further on the left. Because if he goes a little bit further on the left, then he will actually get more people coming to him and stealing from the people from the other person. So what this means is that this is the first move of the first of the two players. Now the second ice cream seller sees the first one behaving in this way, and he does the same. And we'll eventually move one step, and we're sharing again half and half. But again, this doesn't stop there, because eventually the first ice cream seller can move a little bit further towards the center, and the other one can do the same, up to sequentially both sharing the center point. And what's the point of this? Well, if both have the center point, they still share half of the beach, right? So what's the point of this? Given that moving from one point to another one is not effortless, this means that this has produced exactly the same outcome, but with an additional level of effort, because we don't know what the other person would do. If, on the other hand, we have complete information, we would just simply say, look, given that the outcome would be this one, we can just not move and stay where we are, and we just share half of the beach, right? So this is just an example of the type of modeling things we tend to do in economics, and the tools we tend to use to describe how social behavior interaction and to work, right? We also know that all these models are highly impractical because there are many, many, many factors we don't take into account, right? But no, we are not trying to believe and pretend that these are the reality, right? But the idea is that we try to formulate this in a rigorous mathematical way and simplify it on purpose because it gives us an intuition about how people behave, right? However, as I said, these are still useful stuff, to actually understand the relation between economic agents, and their implications for the bigger society. And particularly nowadays are much more important in the age of AI, because at the end of the day, this is actually help us understanding, the interpret up of, what outcomes of models are, outcomes of objects are, and actually tests our, rational thinking. And this is the way we tend to probably survive in an age or society where we can get all the answers just asking on the net. But questioning things and trying to think around it and trying to have this kind of mindset, this is exactly what will help us to, let's say, survive the age of AI, I would say, right? So thank you so much for listening. So I guess we're going to start off now our Q&A on some questions. See if there's going to be something around.
Yes, thank you very much, Dario. That was incredibly interesting. Some, enjoyable maths, bringing me back to my undergrad. Of course, maybe in a more applied sense, and of course, you're trying to make inferences about, the macroeconomics that this can comment on. We're joined today with Faridah, a student ambassador at Homerton, and if you'd like to put down some questions for us to answer, for Faridah to answer, then we can jump on the Q&A now. So, do we have any advice for TMUA?
Okay, let me just give like a quick introduction. My name is Faridah, and I just finished my first year doing economics. For the TMUA, I think the main thing I would advise to do is probably just practice questions, practice loads of past papers in timed conditions because the time constraints for the TMUA is quite tight. So I would recommend just to do loads of past papers and also make sure that you go through like the syllabus for the TMUA. It should be on the website and just make sure that you actually know everything on the syllabus. And yeah, I think that's the main thing I would say.
Yep. So lots and lots of questions.
Yeah, yeah, loads of questions. And also like worked solutions as well. Yeah. Am I disadvantaged if I don't have econ as was one of them saying? Um, I don't think it's a major disadvantage if you have like a general interest in economics. I think if you kind of have like a basic understanding of economics and you actually have an interest in it, I think it should still be fine. I know someone in my college doing economics as well. He didn't do econ in sixth form, but he did maths and further maths and other sciences, and he seems to really enjoy economics at Cambridge. So I don't think it's a major disadvantage, just as long as you have like a good interest in this subject.
Thanks, Frida.
Yeah.
In terms of extenuating circumstances, if you include this in your application itself, we can take consideration as part of it. So please do include that. You will have to ask your referee to put this within your application. So your referee, your UCAS referee for reference is somebody who writes a small paragraph about you and who knows about you academically. So ideally, this will be a tutor, a teacher at your school, or maybe somebody in pastoral care who can then give some input on your extenuating circumstances as well. But thank you for the question.
What TMUA score range does Cambridge typically consider competitive for applicants? I can't give you like a direct answer to that. Maybe Dario might give you a better answer. But then I've heard of people having scores as low as like a 3.8, whereas people have been um like a 8.3, I think. So I think it's just like they look at your application as a whole, not just specifically the TMUA. So yeah, I don't think it's just like the main thing. But I think you should just try and do your best in every sector. And yeah.
I think Farida, you just understand exactly how it is. I mean, there's no real number because, of course, the test changes every year, and of course, the different medians, and so this is not the matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
One fixed number we will be able to add, but try to do your best is the most important.
Yeah.
Did you come to decide? Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
How did you come to decide to go to Homerton College? I remember I did like this webinar, I think, and I was given like a brief introduction of Homerton, how it's far away from town, so we don't get as many tourists, how it's like this little community, how it's the most diverse college, how it's quite cheap as well, and how everyone here is really nice. And yeah, I just thought it was like a really nice college. And I also did research on it as well. And I just thought it would be a really nice place where I would thrive in. Um, and yeah, that's why I chose Homerton.
And what would you say about now that you've had some time here? What do you think of Homerton? Do you think it lives up to that?
Yeah, I would say it lives up to that. It's definitely quite far. I think it will definitely help if you cycle. Because I personally don't cycle, so it's quite a long trek to Citric sites where you have most of your lectures for economics. But besides that, I really love Homerton. It's a really nice college. It's quite big as well. And it's also quite chill. You can like walk on the grass, for example, which in other colleges you aren't allowed to, which is nice. And yeah.
Oh, brilliant. If you predicted possibly a grade lower than you should as an A-level further maths due to extenuating circumstances, is that considered, or is it more a sense of leniency? We potentially may um, accommodate for this, although we do have a fairly strict offer conditions. It's more that we will give you the offer based off of the offer for economics, which is A star, A star, A. And if you don't quite meet that offer, we can then take into account those extenuating circumstances and potentially still give you a place on reconsideration. But we won't offer lower than the minimum requirement of A star, A star, A.
Yeah, I was just going to add, my offer was also A star, A star, A, but then I did maths, further maths, and economics. And my offer was A star in maths, but then A star A in economics and further maths. And I ended up getting an A in further maths. So I don't think it's that much of a big deal if you get an A in further maths.
Mm.
I just wanted to add that in as well, just in
Yeah,
case.
it depends as well on your offer conditions as well.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that, like you say, the typical offer conditions do have the A star in maths, and with some leniency between what you get your second A star in.
Yeah.
I've lived in England until year 8 and moved to Dubai for my dad's job temporarily. Do I still get national fees? This may be slightly more complex to answer live on a webinar right now. I know there has to be a certain amount of live time within the UK within the past 3 years, and potentially as a UK national, you may be able to still get home fees. But this is for something to have a look at online. While we're doing the Q&A, I might have a little search to see where you can get information on this, because I won't be able to answer it straight away.
So, what career paths do students graduating from Cambridge Economics typically go into? Um, I'm not 100% sure as I'm only just finished my first year, but most people tend to go into finance, mainly just like different sectors in finance, or maybe like work in government. But besides that, I'm not really sure what other people do. Um, but I think it's just like I think economics is quite broad. You can go into like loads of things. So I don't think it's like a strict sector that you have to go into. But yeah, I think it's quite flexible and people go into different things.
Let me just add on this. I mean, of course, that's exactly the point. Farida, we had many people going everywhere, so we can say that, it's not even the majority of as we go into finance. We have some every year. We go to the obvious finance and consultancy, but obviously central banking, obviously also academia, also into the public sector, civil service, and any sort of other type of things. So there are many, many other options which are available. So people are going to data science as well as another option. So it's not really, as I said, it's very broad. And this is the thing. You don't have to think that, every person who gets into into economics ends up in finance. I mean, there would be a certain majority. At the end of the day,
Yeah,
education, and it's our alumni. Also, you will meet eventually our alumni. We tend to invite them quite often for inspirational talks. You'll see. So yeah, many options.
yeah. Also, how important is the personal statement for economics at Cambridge? And should I put this webinar in my personal statement. I think Dario might be.
No, it's not this. The is obviously important, but the webinar is not clearly one of these things. But it's important, I would say, to show that you're motivated. I would say this is the important thing, and trying to give genuine, not artificial motivations on it, because of course we will have to talk eventually about it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think just talk about like what interests you in economics, because you're choosing to apply to economics at Cambridge, which is quite intense. So just explain like what motivates you and stuff like that, I would say. There's another question that's kind of based around the personal statement.
I think it's very
I
simple.
don't think.
Yeah, it's nothing more. Already answered that.
Okay.
So if you're applying for maths and economics, you may want to use that additional personal statement to make it very selective towards just the economics course, potentially. We understand that as a university that people are going to be applying to different universities as well, so you don't have to make it exclusively specialized to just Cambridge.
The next question is, what is a typical day in the life of an economics student? I was thinking of like filming a video on this to answer this question because I'm going to be the next BME officer, so I just thought it would be nice to do something like that. But just to explain, during like term time, when it's like maybe like midterm, I think we tend to have 9 a.m.s almost every weekday, except like Fridays. So I'll just wake up at like 7 a.m. I tend to take like an hour to get ready. Then I allocate like around an hour to get to Citric site for my 9 a.m. And I tend to get back to Homerton after lectures at around like 12. And then after this, I either do supervisions or supervision work in the library, or I just do general revision. And then I have lunch and then dinner. And yeah, it's not really like a structured day. It kind of looks different on a day to day, but then it's just more of like allocating time to what works best for you. And yeah, you just need to make sure that you stay on top of everything, basically. Would you recommend doing the STEP foundational modules for the TMUA? I personally didn't do that. I've never looked at a STEP paper either, so I'm not sure how similar this must be. So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that question.
So I did take STEP as part of the offer conditions for maths. The STEP is slightly different. With TMUA, you've got lots of questions that you have to answer very quickly, and part of that will be just fluidity in answers. I would recommend having a look at some of the STEP questions. In particular, if you're interested, having a look at Stephen Sickloss's book in Advanced Mathematics. This book has STEP question papers and breaks down the solutions in a very readable format. Now, I wouldn't recommend you stick too much on STEP because you're expected to give reasonings within your STEP questions, and importantly, with the TMUA, you're asked to answer lots of questions very quickly. So you should be more focused on trying to have fluency with your mathematical knowledge rather than trying to explain things effectively.
The next question is, how much economics should I know if I don't do economics A level? I think maybe just like a basic understanding of economics should be fine. But I think also Dario might be able to help with this question because he actually interviews people for economics. So
So
I think I'll leave that to him.
is that you don't need to know, as I said before, the entire syllabus or anything related to that. The important thing is that you have an understanding to, because if you want to do economics, I mean, you would want to show us that you have read something, you have thought about it, right? Is the point. So we're not going to test you on anything further, on anything on the syllabus itself in the interview, right? That's the point. We're going to try to go into economics problem, but they said, well, the important thing is the reasoning behind, right? So this is the type of questions that, more logical type of thinking, rather than the logical problem. I'm just trying to think it through whether the concept something happens, something gets up, right? So these are the type of things.
The next question is how much of contact/tutor time do students get on average per week? I'm assuming you mean supervisions, and these tend to range from week 1 to week 8. I would say on a busy week, there's been a day where I've had like 3 supervisions in one day, and like maybe like 4 or 5 in one week. So that's like 5 hours because each supervision is around an hour. And there's some other weeks where I only have like one supervision or like no supervisions, which is like at the very start. And that would obviously be like 0 hours or 1 hour. Should I apply to a college with the highest acceptance rate? I don't think I'm the best person to answer that question.
They fluctuate every year. So believe it or not, there's plenty of other students that think exactly the same thing. They go, okay, highest acceptance rate. There's very few people that have applied there. And you find that the year after, loads of people have applied and they have a low acceptance rate. So I don't think there's much worth to trying to game the system. I would apply to the college that you find the most interesting, rather than trying to go to the one with the highest acceptance rate. And then, of course, trying to prove your worth in how interested you are in the degree. And that's the best way of going about it.
The next question is basically asking about how maths-based the interview is. So I had 2 interviews. One was purely maths, and the other one was kind of like economics related. So the maths ones was literally just like maths questions. I did it with Dario actually. It was more of like sketching graphs, probability, stuff like that. It wasn't really like econometrics. That's more of like what you actually learn when you get into uni. But yeah, that was my interview structure.
So the point, if I can just say a bit more on this. So yeah, I mean, there is, as Faridah said, is part of what we have done. I mean, the point is that we need to test your basic knowledge of maths or the level that we need. That's the important thing. But we're not as I said, we're not testing anything which is a part of the syllabus. There's no need for you to explain you what is a regression line or the least squares or anything like that. It's nothing to do with this. It's actually it's not beyond what is the content of the syllabus or what you've done in A levels. But obviously, we need something more. So there's something you have not seen. But surely, if there's a question of a type of a framework which you have not seen, I will introduce the framework and then I will let you think about it. And I said the point is not the right answer.
Is it worth picking colleges based on their economics tutors? I wouldn't necessarily do this just off that alone, just because, of course, it's hard to feel like you have a proper relationship with somebody before you even met them. That being said, the relationships that you do have with your tutors and your supervisors will be good later on. And I can assure you that all the academics in Cambridge will be suitable for you.
The next one is which further maths modules are the most useful? I personally did stats and mechanics. I think as long as you do statistics, it will be quite helpful. But then I know some people that didn't do statistics and they're still fine. So I would say the most useful is stats, but then I don't think it's necessary.
Um, Not entirely sure. Please explain the links to Southeast England. I'm not sure entirely if that's a question. Are there any tips for the interview process? Do you want to give any tips, Faridah?
Yeah, I think the main thing that helped me was literally just talking about economics and just making sure that I have a good logical chain of thought. I think that definitely helped with my first interview that was centered around like economics. And then I also did tutoring. I used to tutor my peers doing maths. And this kind of helped me to kind of like explain math and actually understand the different fundamental bits of A-level maths. So I think I was able to actually like speak about those things in my interview, and I think that really helped. So yeah, I think just generally just speaking about your subject is quite helpful. And yeah, maybe also going over your personal statement, but I wasn't asked anything about my personal statement. But I think that's quite helpful as well.
What is the benefit of an open application? Are you simply randomly assigned to a college that judges your application, or is it more generalized when your application is considered? It is effectively automated. It's loosely based off the number of applications that we've had at the colleges and the number of places they have left over. So it effectively balances out that curve that I was telling you about in terms of people applying to maybe a college that had a higher acceptance rate the previous year. If you don't have any particular preference, it's advisable to do that. But if you have any particular interest, do apply to the college that you're interested in.
The next question is, what do I do if I feel like I'm behind most Cambridge applicants? I remember I felt the same, but then I think that's probably how everyone feels. I feel like there might always seem like there's someone doing more than you. I feel like if you're just confident in what you're doing and if you actually stick to your personal deadlines and make sure that you actually hit the goals, like your personal goals, I think you should be fine. Um, but yeah, I think that's like the main advice I can give based on
Thank you very much. That's sound advice. And I have seen in the webinar chat that we have a question on what any other resources are there apart from the TMUA past papers. A second one potentially would be the UK Maths Challenge past papers. They can be very useful in terms of fast problem solving questions and the type of questions that you'll get during your TMUA. And I believe Faridah covered how you might prepare for your interview. So thank you very much for coming to today's economic subject focus session. Thank you very much to both Dario and Faridah for helping out. Faridah, at a moment's notice, today was called up. So thank you in particular for coming along. And we wish you all the best in your applications in the future. So thank you both for that.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.